Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Elia Scorti, and I'm a cloud security engineer here at Dido. And I also want to thank everyone for joining the second webinar in our Working Remotely series. This webinar is called Securely Working from Home. So here's the list of the webinars in the series so far. We have our previous webinar. We provide a lot of tips and tricks for staying productive when working from home. And if you didn't get a chance to see that, we'll provide the link where you can access that content. Dido is and has always been a 100% remote company. So we feel like we've walked the talk and we have a lot of valuable information and experience to share. And our next webinar is about productivity and collaboration. So be sure to check that out as well. And if you can't make it during the time, we'll be sharing the recording and slides for that as well. So before we jump into the presentation, I want to share with you a little bit about us, about Dido, who we are and what we do. We are a leading cloud consultancy and Google Cloud Premier Partner that focuses on cloud migration, IT modernization, and ongoing services for organizations interested in leveraging Google's cloud infrastructure. We provide data warehousing services, Google Maps location services, the G Suite productivity services. We have 12 years as a Google Cloud Premier Partner, serving over 1,400 customers. We specialize in Kubernetes, DevOps, data analytics, Google Maps, G Suite, and we've supported a wide variety of use cases and deployments. So if you have any needs in any of these areas, please reach out. We are here to help. And here are a few of our happy customers. So now we'll begin the presentation. But before we start, I just want to say if you do have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the message box and I will try to answer it. After I go through the slides, I just want to make sure that I'm able to get through the slides within the time we have. I think it'll take about 30 to 45 minutes to get through the slides. So with the current COVID-19 pandemic forcing companies to have their workforce work remotely, we wanted to share some of the risks associated with working from home, as well as best practices to help reduce the likelihood of falling victim to malicious attackers who are trying to take advantage of the current situation to help with their attacks. So the focus of this presentation is on the biggest risks associated with working from home and the things that you can do that will have the biggest impact in keeping you safe. This presentation is more about the behavioral things. We tried to make this as non-technical as possible. So what are those top risks? Those top risks are social engineering, passwords, and updating software. 97% of attacks rely on some form of social engineering. 80% of hacking-related breaches involve compromise and weak credentials, and 60% of breaches involve the exploitation of an unpatched vulnerability. So given these statistics, getting these things right will go a long way in defending yourself against attacks. And then what we'll also be discussing in this presentation is how to make sure your home network is secure and what you should do if you are going to use public Wi-Fi. But one more thing before we move forward to the meat of this presentation, we want to iterate that technology is not enough. You can have firewalls and antivirus, and there's a ton of different technologies used to defend against attacks, but there's a human element to most attacks. These attacks prey on our emotions and ignorance, so it's very important to educate ourselves on the tactics that the bad guys are using so that we're not the weak link. So Social engineering, what is it? According to dictionary.com, it is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. So what does that look like? What types of social engineering attacks are there? So one type of social engineering attack is something called phishing. So phishing takes place when a malicious actor sends an email masquerading as someone else in an attempt to trick you into visiting a fake website where you enter some personal information or run some malicious software on your system. Or they might get you to try to click on an attachment, download an attachment that has some malware associated with it. Some indicators that an email that you received is phishing. Um, there's usually some type of story involved that tries to uh, create a sense of urgency. Like they might mention that there's like some suspicious activity going on with your account, or there's a problem with your account. You need to confirm some personal info. So those are things to watch out for. And another type of social engineering attack, which is related to phishing, is spear phishing. Um, and this is a much more targeted phishing attack. And here, the attacker researches their target through social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and which provides a treasure trove of information to the bad guys. And they use this information to craft an email that's a lot more believable. And then another type of social engineering attack that's related is called CEO fraud. So it's similar to spear phishing, but instead of getting you to click on a link or download an attachment, the attacker is attempting to trick you into approving something like a wire transfer or sending a sensitive document to the attacker. So if you see an email from your boss that seems random and urgent instead of complying with what is asked in the email, I would suggest reaching out directly to your boss through a different channel just to make sure that the request is legitimate. And always be careful what you click on, even if it comes from your boss. And another type of social engineering attack is called vishing, which is um, pretty much the same thing as the other attacks, but it's used through the phone. So here the attacker calls pretending to be an individual or organization you know and trust. Personally, I've received calls from people claiming to be from the IRS, demanding that I need to pay some uh, bogus tax bill, or I'll be in like some deep trouble. And last, we have USB drops. So in this type of attack, the attacker installs some malicious software in a USB in the hopes that they will get a victim to plug in that USB into their machine. And once they do that, the computer downloads whatever malicious software is on the USB. So never use an unknown or unauthorized USB device. Um, uh, One of my friends is a penetration tester, and he told me a story where they were on an engagement, and they sent a gift basket to one of the employees of the company that they were performing a pen testing engagement on. And in the gift basket, they had all types of company branded swag like shirts and coffee mugs, and also a USB. And of course, you know, you might trust something like that. So once they use that USB and plug it in, they got you. So how to shield against social engineering attacks? Awareness and vigilance are key. Resist the rush, as mentioned before. These attacks try to create a sense of urgency and fear. So you should be aware of that, and do not get caught up in those emotions. Try not to let it cloud your judgment, and always be um, cynical about these types of emails or phone calls. If you receive a phone call from someone claiming to be the IRS or the bank and you're worried about it, hang up and call those organizations directly yourself. And think before you click, and don't just download or plug things into your computer. So personalized attacks, this is related to the spear phishing and CEO fraud attacks. Attackers like to make their attacks personalized, which adds an extra element of fear sometimes. So once again, just be aware and try not to get caught up in those types of emotions. So what we have here is an example of a fake PayPal website. And it looks like the login page for PayPal. And if you look at the URL, it has paypal.com in the URL. So it seems legit, right? However, in order to know what a valid URL looks like, we need to know how a URL is constructed. So here's an example of google.com URL. So what we need to be aware of is this .com is the top level domain. So this could be .com, .gov, .org, and whatever is before that is the domain name. So if what's before the .com is not what you expect, you should be very wary. So if we go to the previous page, we have two .coms. So which one is the domain? You want to, the top level domain is usually the last .com or .org or .gov that you'll see in the URL, which would make the domain name, in this case, Confirmation Manager Security, and not PayPal. And we have a few examples of scammers using the current COVID-19 situation to help them with their phishing attacks. On the left, we have an email, which is claiming to be from the World Health Organization, asking you to click the button below to download something. Some signs that this is phishing is the generic greeting, "Dear Sir," and there are some clear grammatical issues and some spelling issues as well. So those are some clear signs. And on the right, we have a website masquerading as the World Health Organization, and it's trying to get victims to submit their credentials. And another example of scammers trying to exploit the coronavirus. Here, there's a pretty popular map being shared that shows the geographic distribution of COVID-19 cases. So there's a malicious version of that as well that looks identical to the actual map. So you want to watch out for that. In this case, the domain is corona-virus-map.com. And on the next slide, we have the actual legitimate URL for that map in case you do want to check that out. And lastly, for our examples of scammers using coronavirus to help with their phishing attempts, we have an email claiming to be from the CDC, and they want you to click this hyperlink right here. And if we look at the URL, it seems to check out. The top level domain is .gov, and the domain is CDC, so that seems to check out. However, just because what you see looks right, it doesn't mean that's where you would go if you were to click this link. So to find out where it would actually take you, what you can do is hover over the hyperlink, and on the bottom left of your browser, it'll tell you where you're actually going to go. And another trick is just to right click and copy the link and then paste it in some type of uh, text editor document. But me, I wouldn't even risk either of those. I would just ignore this and delete it, because you might accidentally click the mouse. So phishing defense tools, from the people side, as mentioned, vigilance and education and awareness are key, but we also wanted to share some technology defense tools. One is multi-factor authentication, and we're going to speak more about that in some upcoming slides. One thing I do want to share is that Google's Titan Security Key is probably the most secure form of multi-factor authentication at the moment. Another thing that you want is antivirus. Make sure it's updated. And then there's a couple Chrome extensions you can use. One is called Password Checkup. And the way this works is wherever you sign in, if you enter a username and password that is associated with a data breach known to Google, you will receive an alert. And Password Alert, if you enter your Google account password or Google for Work password into anywhere other than Google's sign-in page, you'll receive an alert as well. And one other thing that you might want to do is make sure that the safe browsing feature is enabled in Chrome. It's usually enabled by default, but you should probably double check. And the way you do that is you click the three dots on the top right of your browser, and that will create this drop down. And then you'll want to go to settings, and then from settings, you'll go to the privacy and security portion of the menu, and then you'll see safe browsing, and you just want to make sure that that's enabled. And what safe browsing does is Google has a list of websites that they know to be bad. And if the browser detects that you're that you're about to visit one of those websites, it'll give you a warning beforehand. So passwords, tips for secure passwords. Tip 1, make each password long and strong. The more characters in your password, the stronger it is. Tip 2, use multiple words to create a passphrase, such as "don't forget to stand" or "stopping Wood's snowy evening." And the reason for this is this makes the password easier to remember, but hard to guess. Tip 3, create a unique password for each account. If you can't remember them all, ask if you can use a password manager. A password manager I recommend is KeePass. It's I prefer like a standalone password manager than a browser-based password manager. Tip 4, keep passwords a secret and never share them with anyone, including a supervisor, because this just increases the chance that you get compromised. Tip 5, never use public computers to log into your online accounts. The public computer may have some type of malware on the system, or you might forget to clear the cache after you use the public computer. So you definitely want to avoid entering in any of your credentials in any accounts when using a public computer. And lastly, as mentioned before, use two-step verification, which is also known as, which is a form of multi-factor authentication. So to sum that all up, use a unique long passphrase for each of your accounts, and whenever possible, use two-step verification. So what is two-step verification? It is essentially providing a second form of proof that you are who you say you are. How does two-step verification work? It requires something you know, such as your password, and it requires something you have, such as your access to, such as like your mobile device or your token. It could also involve something you know, I mean, something you are, like your fingerprint or your iris. And why should I use two-step verification? As mentioned before, um, if your credentials are compromised, um, an attacker an attacker has your passwords, um, that wouldn't be enough for them to compromise your account, because they would need that second form of authentication. And for the last top risk, we have patching and updating. Basic security hygiene can help reduce risks associated with known vulnerabilities, like those packaged into exploits sent as attachments in phishing emails. So if your OS or applications on your system are not up to date, there may be some easily obtainable exploit available that an attacker can use to gain access to your system. There have been countless data breaches where unpatched vulnerabilities contributed to that data breach. One example of this is the Equifax data breach, where unpatched Linux servers helped lead to the loss of important data. And now to security at home. So the main things you want to focus on for your security at home is to secure your Wi-Fi network. You want to periodically review what devices are on your home network, and you want to make sure those devices each have a unique password and are up to date. So for securing your home Wi-Fi network, you want to change the default password for the gateway. You want to change the SSID, also known as Service Set Identifier, which is essentially the name that you see when you try to connect to Wi-Fi network. You want to make sure you're using at least WPA2 encryption. And you also want to change the default password used to connect to the network. Make sure it's long and strong. And to configure these settings, search for the make and model of your wireless access point, and there should be some manual that you can look at to figure out how to do that. And for smart home devices, you want to make sure that you only connect smart home devices that you need in your home network, and as mentioned before, keep track of them, know what's connected to your network. You want to purchase smart home devices from well-known, trusted vendors, and you want to make sure they're updated over time. And you also want to change the default password. There have been a lot of stories in the news where, like, the Ring doorbell, which is like a smart doorbell, has been hacked because the default password wasn't changed. So make sure you change the default passwords. Like if an attacker knows the make and model of your device, it's very trivial to figure out what the default password on those devices are. So 6 signs you've been hacked. Your antivirus program triggers an alert. So it is possible that the alert triggered by your antivirus program is a false positive, but um, you should still be very careful and treat it as something that you need to address. Sign 2, your password no longer works for one of your accounts, but you know your password is correct. This indicates that an attacker has compromised your account and locked you out of it. Sign 3, you get a pop-up message stating that your computer is infected and you must pay a ransom or call a phone number to fix the problem. Sign 4, your friends and coworkers are receiving odd messages that you never sent. Your browser is taking you to random websites that you can't close. And lastly, programs and apps start crashing or performing very slowly. And we have some do's and don'ts to help you stay safe. For the do's, use antivirus software and keep it updated. Keep your operating system and your applications updated and patched. Install software and apps only from trusted sites. Only click on links or open attachments in emails you are expecting, and report incidents to your security team. And for don'ts, do not open unexpected email attachments, never pay a ransom, and do not click on suspicious or untrusted email links. Do not plug untrusted USB drives into your work computers. And if your computer has been infected, don't try to fix it yourself. Make sure you report it to your security team. And I just wanted to share a helpful website called Have I Been Pwned? So with this website, you can submit your email address and it tells you whether that email address, the credentials associated with it have been compromised through a hack, and it tells you which websites were hacked as part of that compromise. So that concludes the security portion of the webinar. Also wanted to share a couple links. We have a web page that has a ton of information on working remotely. So please check that out. And we have another link, 10 G Suite tips to work with remote teams. So we have a ton of content on to help you work remotely during this time. And a recording of this session and follow-up content will be sent to all those registered. And we are your partner with this. We are your partner in this, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions around this presentation or around working remotely, or about any of the Google Cloud products in general, or G Suite or anything like that. Please reach out to us. We're here to help. And that is it.